The word that lit the room. At the busiest hour of Tuesday lunch, the cafe hummed like a hive, espresso hissing, stools scraping, a sawtooth of chatter cutting through the clink of cups. Casey had arranged her scene with the care of a shy director. She sat diagonally across from Jenna, close enough to hear her laugh, but far enough to pretend she wasn't cataloging every twitch of that smile. The plan was simple. Blend in, ask for the hot sauce, don't do anything memorable. Then her mouth tripped. "Babe, could you—" The word detonated in the air. Forks froze mid-flight, eyes swung like cameras, and Jenna's dark gaze caught the syllable as if she'd been waiting for it. There was a beat of silence as complete as snowfall, then Jenna's grin slid in. Mischief first, tenderness right behind it. "Sure thing," she murmured, drawing out the syllables just enough to paint the moment in neon. Her fingers grazed Casey's as she passed the bottle. "Here you go, babe." Laughter rustled around the table. Not mean, just too loud for Casey's pounding heart. She stared hard at her sandwich like it held instructions for surviving public mortification, but her pulse kept tapping out a foolish rhythm. "You said it, you said it, you said it." When the group broke to leave, Jenna lingered by Casey's elbow, perfume soft and citrus, voice barely above a whisper. "See you in Professor Miller's class tomorrow," she said, slinging her bag with unbothered grace. "I'll save you a seat, babe." The word, weaponized with warmth, zapped straight through Casey's composure. She made it to the door on autopilot, cheeks burning, her own name feeling unfamiliar. Outside, Sophie half laughed, half screeched, "You're done!" She's never letting this go. Maybe Casey should have felt terror only, but beneath the humiliation, a new current crackled. Jenna hadn't recoiled. She'd leaned in, morning brought no mercy. Casey arrived at lecture 12 minutes early, trying to blend into the carpet. Rows filled. Notes organized. Breath even. Then sunlight and vanilla coffee drifted in with Jenna. She scanned the room, spotted Casey, and brightened the way people do when they find what they came for. She climbed over knees and backpacks to drop into the seat right next to her like it was the only logical place in the world. "Responsible today," Jenna murmured. "Beating me to the good seats, babe," Pens faltered. A couple of heads turned. Casey wrote the date so carefully it looked forged. "You can't say that here," she hissed. "Why not?" Jenna's eyes were lights underwater, teasing, searching. "We're friends who use friendly words. Unless you think there's something more in it." Professor Miller launched into romantic poetry like the universe was a comedian with impeccable timing. Casey focused on the slide. Jenna texted, "You're cute when you pretend you're not listening, babe." Casey's pen blotted an ink comet. Another ping. "Lunch?" "I promised to behave mostly." Mostly was a door left ajar. Casey said yes, and spent the rest of class pretending the floor wouldn't melt open if Jenna said babe again. At the sandwich counter 30 minutes later, Jenna ordered her usual with confident ease and then turned, eyebrows lifted, and called it loud enough for the cashier and 3 tables to hear, "What are you having, babe?" The word glowed with a new color then. Less joke, more test, a code embedded with dare and invitation. Casey ordered grilled cheese, hands not quite steady, while Jenna looked unbearably pleased with herself. They ate by the window, feet bumping under the table, the teas stretched taut between them. When Casey finally managed, "You're doing this on purpose," Jenna tilted her head like a scientist admiring an experiment. "Maybe I like seeing you react," she said softly. "Maybe I like knowing I can make your heart speed up with just one word. Maybe I don't mind if it's ours." Teasing rights, boundaries, and a quiet kind of courage. The weekend came with soft light and restless thoughts. Casey tried to convince herself that Jenna's teasing was nothing more than friendly mischief, the way one might nudge a shy friend just to see their cheeks turn pink. But deep down, she knew it was something else, something that hovered between playfulness and affection, teasing and testing. Every time Jenna said that word, it carried a hidden question that neither of them had dared to answer. At Emma's apartment that Friday night, the party pulsed with low music and laughter, a mess of voices and flashing lights. Casey lingered near the kitchen counter, half sheltered by the hum of conversation, pretending to scroll through her phone while she counted the seconds until Jenna arrived. And when she finally did, hair loose, eyes bright, confidence wrapped around her like a second skin, it felt like the whole room shifted. Jenna spotted her instantly, weaving through the crowd with a grin that was both trouble and home. "There you are, babe," she said, leaning close enough that Casey could feel the whisper of breath against her ear. "Why are you hiding in here? The dance floor's not that scary. I'm just not really a party person," Casey murmured, clutching her cup for stability. Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to bury it beneath a practiced smile. "I know," Jenna said softly, her tone different now, gentler, more knowing. "You like quiet spaces. Coffee shops. That little bookstore where you spend half your life." Casey blinked, startled by the detail. "How do you even know that?" Jenna's eyes flickered with warmth. "Because I notice things about you, like how you always order black coffee but still add a single sugar packet after pretending you don't need it, or how you bite your lip when you're nervous, or how your eyes dart away every time I call you babe." Casey froze, pulse quickening under the weight of Jenna's attention. There was no teasing in her voice now, only a quiet honesty that wrapped around her heart like a hand. Before she could respond, Emma's voice cut through the moment, loud and laughing. "Casey, come dance!" "Jenna, get her out here before she overthinks herself to death." Jenna's grin returned, softened but dangerous. "Come on, babe. Live a little." What followed was a blur of movement and laughter and unspoken tension. Jenna stayed close, always within reach, always a touch away from confession. And for the first time, Casey stopped trying to analyze what it meant. She just felt it. The rhythm, the warmth, the shared smiles that lingered too long. Later, when the noise became too much, she slipped out onto the small balcony for air. The city stretched below, a glittering sea of lights, indifferent and infinite. A few moments later, the door slid open behind her. "Hiding out here again, babe?" Jenna's voice was softer this time, almost careful. She stepped beside Casey, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You okay?" Casey nodded, though her throat felt tight. "Just needed some quiet." "My brain gets loud when I'm around you," Jenna laughed gently, tilting her head. "That sounds like a compliment." "Maybe it is," Casey admitted. There was silence, the kind that hums with things unsaid. Then Jenna turned to her, eyes shimmering in the city glow. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. What are we doing, Casey?" The question was barely above a whisper, but it cracked something open between them. "You blush every time I tease you. You stare when you think I'm not looking. And yet, you act like all of this is just friendship. Do you want it to be just that?" The words hit like an electric storm. Casey's breath caught, her voice trembling as she finally said, "I don't know. I'm scared. I like you, Jenna, maybe too much, but I don't know what you want." Jenna smiled, her voice a whisper laced with amusement and tenderness. "I want you to stop hiding behind fear. I want you to stop thinking someone like me couldn't want someone like you." Then, with the ease of someone crossing a finish line, Jenna leaned forward and kissed her. It was soft and sure, and exactly everything Casey hadn't dared to imagine out loud. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless, smiling like the world had shifted slightly in their favor. "Still embarrassed about calling me babe?" Jenna teased gently. "Maybe," Casey said, cheeks flushed but eyes bright. "But now I know why my heart said it." Love, labels, and lessons in trust. The next morning brought sunlight, disbelief, and 17 unread messages from their friends. Emma, "You two finally?" Sophie, "We saw that balcony moment. Don't deny it." Alex, "About time, you two disaster romantics." But one message stood out, Jenna's, sent at 2:47 a.m. "Good morning, babe. Ready for everyone to know it's not a joke anymore?" Casey read it 10 times before her shaking fingers found the courage to reply. "If you mean what I think you mean, then yes." An hour later, Jenna called. "Good morning, beautiful," she said, her voice lazy with sleep and happiness. "Still alive? Or did your brain short-circuit from overthinking?" "Both," Casey said, laughing nervously. I don't know what happens now. What happens, Jenna said firmly, is that I take you on an actual date. And when I call you babe now, it's not to tease you. It's because you're mine. The word mine didn't sound like ownership. It sounded like care. That morning, they met for breakfast and the world seemed new. Casey couldn't stop smiling. When Jenna reached across the table and linked their fingers, Casey felt something in her chest settle into place. For weeks, their friends couldn't stop celebrating them. Finally, Emma declared one afternoon, I was ready to lock you two in a closet until you figured it out. Casey blushed. Jenna only laughed. You could have just asked, she said. They fell into a rhythm, a beautiful one. Study sessions blurred into kisses between notes, coffee breaks into hand-holding under the table. Casey began to realize that love wasn't always fireworks. Sometimes it was the quiet act of being chosen every day. But then came Madison, Jenna's new project partner. Brilliant, confident, worldly. The kind of girl who could discuss art history and economics in one breath while wearing a coat that probably cost more than Casey's rent. And suddenly Jenna's messages slowed. Coffee dates shortened. Her laughter, once immediate, now arrived delayed and distracted. Who's Madison? Casey asked one evening, trying to sound curious, not concerned. Oh, she's just my partner for Professor Williams's final. We're doing a paper on feminist poetry. She's smart, really smart. Jenna's tone was casual, but her smile lingered a moment too long, and for the first time since that night on the balcony, Casey's heart tightened with unease. She told herself not to spiral, that Jenna had chosen her, that jealousy wasn't fair, but when someone lights up talking about another person, insecurity doesn't ask for permission. The next few days stretched with quiet distance. Jenna was kind but distracted, her texts shorter, her calls fewer. When they finally sat together again at the same cafe where it all began, Casey felt like she was holding on to something that was slipping through her fingers. You've been busy, she said softly, stirring her untouched coffee. Yeah. Sorry, Jenna replied, not quite meeting her eyes. The project's intense. Madison's ideas are amazing. She lived in Paris, actually. The word Paris fell like a weight. Casey smiled through the ache. She sounds impressive. She is, Jenna said, almost proudly. And that was what hurt most. Not jealousy, but the fear that admiration could turn into something else. When the silence stretched too long, Casey whispered, Do you still want this? Us, Jenna blinked, startled. Of course I do. Casey, you're my girlfriend. Then why does it feel like I'm competing with someone I can't even measure up to? Jenna's expression hardened. You're being unfair. She's just my partner. Casey looked down, voice trembling. Maybe, but I miss when you looked at me the way you look when you talk about her. The words hung in the air, sharp and fragile. For the first time since their story began, babe didn't sound like affection. It sounded like a memory. That night, Casey walked home alone under the same streetlights that had once made her believe in magic. Now they only cast shadows. Silence, space, and second chances. 3 days passed in a haze of silence that felt louder than any argument they had ever had. Casey's phone lay on her desk, screen dark, as if mocking the absence of Jenna's name, lighting it up. Every few hours she'd pick it up, stare at the last text, "Let's talk later," and set it back down again, the weight of those words pressing into her chest like an anchor. It wasn't anger that filled her. It was fear. Fear that maybe she'd pushed too hard, that her insecurities had cracked something fragile and real. The campus felt emptier, every hallway echoing with ghosts of laughter that used to be theirs. Even her friends tread carefully, speaking in soft voices as if sound alone might shatter her. Emma dropped by with coffee. Sophie texted her memes. Alex sent playlists titled Songs for Idiots Who Miss Their Girlfriends. But nothing helped. Nights were the worst. Every time Casey closed her eyes, she replayed that conversation in the cafe. The way Jenna's expression had turned from hurt to guarded. The way her own words had hung like a question that neither of them had known how to answer. By Thursday evening, the silence had stretched to the breaking point. The rational part of her whispered to leave it alone, to give Jenna space, to let time smooth out the edges. But the louder, braver part, the one that still remembered Jenna's laugh and the warmth of her hand, refused to surrender without trying. So she walked. Across the campus quad, through the golden wash of sunset, her heart thundering like it knew this was a crossroads. Jenna's dorm stood at the far end of the street, light spilling from a single window. Casey hesitated at the door, rehearsing apologies she didn't know how to phrase. Then, before fear could stop her, she knocked. When the door opened, Jenna stood there in an oversized sweater and tired eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to sparkle. "Casey," she said softly, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air was thick with unspoken things, all the hurt and longing suspended between them like dust in sunlight. "Can I come in?" Casey finally asked, her voice quiet but steady. Jenna nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the room smelled faintly of coffee and lavender detergent. Books were stacked in uneven towers, papers scattered on the bed. It looked lived in, imperfect, human, so unlike the confident version of Jenna the world saw. She motioned for Casey to sit, but Casey stayed standing, hands clenched at her sides. "I shouldn't have said those things," she began, words tumbling out in a rush. "About Madison. About you not caring. I was scared, and instead of trusting you, I made it sound like I didn't believe in us. I do, Jenna. Sometimes it's hard to believe someone like you could choose someone like me." Jenna looked up. Her expression unreadable at first, then softening into something that made Casey's throat tighten. "I was going to text you tonight," she admitted. "I was angry on Tuesday, but mostly I was hurt. Because when you said those things, it felt like you didn't see everything I've done to make this work. I turned down the study abroad program, Casey. London. I wanted to stay here, with you. But when you questioned me, it made me wonder if that meant anything at all." The confession landed like a weight on Casey's chest. She blinked, stunned. "You turned that down? For us?" "I did," Jenna said simply, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because being with you mattered more. Because you mattered more. But maybe I should have told you instead of expecting you to just know." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, dense with realization. Casey took a small step forward, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to prove yourself. I never wanted you to regret choosing me." "I don't regret it," Jenna said, and her eyes shimmered with something between sadness and love. "But I can't keep fighting your fear for you. You have to meet me halfway." That was the moment it broke inside her, the wall of insecurity, the endless cycle of doubt. Casey's voice cracked as she whispered, "I will. I promise." She took another step closer, and this time Jenna didn't pull away. She reached out, fingers brushing Casey's wrist, the smallest gesture but enough to send warmth flooding through her. "You know," Jenna said softly, "Madison asked me yesterday if we were having problems." Casey blinked, confused. "She did?" Jenna nodded. "She said she could tell because I wouldn't stop talking about you. Apparently, I've been driving her crazy with it. She told me to stop worrying and just fix it." She smiled faintly. "She also wanted me to tell you she thinks you're pretty amazing." Casey let out a half laugh, half sob that broke the tension at last. "So all this time, the person I was jealous of was actually rooting for us?" "Seems like it," Jenna said, her smile growing. "And for the record, Madison has a girlfriend. A very serious one." Casey groaned and covered her face. "You're kidding!" "Nope," Jenna said, laughing quietly now. "I should have mentioned that earlier, but I was too angry to think clearly. So maybe we both owe each other an apology." Something inside Casey eased, the tight coil of anxiety unraveling into warmth. She lowered her hands, meeting Jenna's gaze fully for the first time in days. "I love you," she said simply, because she couldn't hold it back any longer. The words spilled out like breath. "I love you, and I'm sorry I almost ruined what we have." Jenna's expression softened completely then. She reached up and cupped Casey's cheek, thumb brushing away the tears that had gathered. "Someone like me," she said gently, "always chooses someone like you. I fell for you because of how you care, how you overthink, How you say the wrong thing at the wrong time but mean it from the heart. I fell for you when you called me babe by accident. I'm still falling for you now. Casey leaned forward, closing the distance between them in a kiss that felt like forgiveness and home all at once. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads rested together, breaths mingling, everything else fading into quiet. So, Jenna whispered with a smile that curved like sunrise, "Are we okay?" Casey nodded, smiling through the tears. "We're more than okay. We're imperfect, learning, and still completely in love." "Good," Jenna murmured, "because I don't plan on stopping." That night, they lay side by side on Jenna's narrow dorm bed, fingers entwined, the world outside muffled and distant. It wasn't the grand, cinematic reconciliation of movies. No fireworks, no applause. Just two hearts finding rhythm again after stumbling. The only sound was their breathing, steady and in sync, and the quiet realization that love wasn't about perfection. It was about trying again and again and again, with kindness, with faith, with patience. And as Casey drifted toward sleep, Jenna whispered the word that had started it all, softly, lovingly, like a promise renewed. "Good night, Bae." The morning after, healing, growth, and the meaning of babe morning sunlight crept through the thin dorm curtains, spilling over the tangled sheets where Casey and Jenna lay, wrapped around each other like two threads that had finally found where they belonged. The city outside was already stirring, car horns, footsteps, laughter echoing faintly from the street below. But inside, time felt suspended. Casey woke first, blinking slowly as her eyes adjusted to the soft light. For a few precious seconds, she just watched Jenna sleep, her head resting against Casey's shoulder, her breathing even and calm. It was strange to think that just days ago, they had stood on the edge of something fragile and almost lost it. Now, here they were, sharing the kind of quiet that could only exist after the storm had passed. Every rise and fall of Jenna's chest was a reminder that love wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about surviving it together. When Jenna stirred awake, her first instinct was to reach for Casey, fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm before her eyes even opened. "You're still here," she murmured, voice husky from sleep. "I was worried it might have been a dream." Casey smiled faintly, turning to face her fully. "If it is, it's the kind I don't want to wake up from." Jenna chuckled softly, her eyes opening to meet Casey's. "You always say things that sound like they belong in a poem." Casey blushed, brushing a strand of hair from Jenna's face. "I just say what I feel. Maybe that's why I mess things up sometimes. I feel too much." Jenna reached up and touched her cheek gently. "Feeling too much isn't a flaw, babe. It's the reason I fell for you." They lay there for a while, tangled in warmth and silence, until Jenna spoke again, her voice quieter now. "You know, I was scared too." Casey turned toward her, surprised. "You? Scared?" Jenna nodded. "You're not the only one who overthinks. I've always been the one who jokes first, who flirts, who hides behind confidence. But when it's real, when it's someone I actually love, it's terrifying. Because that means they could hurt me in ways no one else can." "You could." The admission caught Casey off guard. She had spent so much time believing she was the fragile one in this story that she hadn't considered the weight Jenna carried too. "I would never want to hurt you," Casey said, voice trembling. "I know," Jenna replied softly, "and that's why I trust you. But love means being honest even when it's uncomfortable. Promise me we'll keep doing that. No running away, no shutting down even when we're scared." "I promise," Casey whispered, and she meant it. Later that morning, they ventured out into the campus sunlight hand in hand. The world seemed brighter somehow, not because it had changed, but because they had. Their steps were lighter, their laughter easier. When they arrived at the cafe, the same one where everything had begun, the staff recognized them immediately. The barista smirked knowingly as she handed over their usual orders. "The famous babe couple," she teased. Casey felt her face flush, but Jenna only grinned, squeezing her hand. "You heard that?" The barista laughed. The whole cafe did. It was iconic. Casey buried her face in her hands, groaning. but Jenna leaned closer and whispered, "See? Even fate's got a sense of humor." They found their old spot by the window. For a moment, it was like rewinding time. Only now, instead of nerves and awkwardness, there was warmth, comfort, and the easy rhythm of people who had already seen each other at their worst. "You know," Casey began, stirring her coffee, "I used to think love was supposed to be perfect, like all butterflies in movie moments. But it's not, is it?" Jenna shook her head with a small smile. "No, it's messy and complicated and full of misunderstandings. But it's also forgiveness, laughter, and choosing each other even when it's hard. That's what makes it beautiful." Casey watched her for a moment, memorizing every word, every expression. She realized that maybe love didn't always have to be grand. It could live in the small things too. The shared glances, the gentle teasing, the way Jenna always ordered extra whipped cream because she knew Casey liked to steal it. Just as they were finishing breakfast, Emma burst through the door, eyes wide with excitement and a phone already recording. "Well, well, if it isn't my favorite celebrity couple," she declared, dragging Sophie behind her. "Can I just say, the entire friend group is still talking about your epic reconciliation. We almost made a TikTok montage," Casey groaned. "Please don't." "Too late," Sophie said with a grin. "Already in the drafts?" Jenna laughed, clearly enjoying the chaos. "You two are impossible." Emma leaned across the table, lowering her voice dramatically. "So, any plans for your first official weekend as the campus power couple?" Jenna raised an eyebrow and turned to Casey. "Actually, I was thinking of a quiet movie night. Maybe no paparazzi, no fan theories. Just us." "Perfect," Casey said, smiling, her heart full in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, they sat together in Jenna's dorm again, a movie playing quietly in the background. Halfway through, Jenna paused it and turned to Casey with a thoughtful expression. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always," Casey said. "You know how that word, babe, used to be a joke between us? It doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like home." Casey's chest tightened with emotion. "It used to make me nervous," she admitted. "Every time you said it, I'd wonder if you were teasing or if you actually meant it. But now it's different. When you say it now, I hear love." Jenna smiled, brushing her thumb along Casey's jawline. "That's because now it is love." They sat there for a long time, no words needed. The movie flickered in the background, forgotten. Outside, the city kept moving, cars honking, people laughing, but inside it was quiet. The kind of quiet that only existed between two people who had finally learned to understand each other. Before they drifted off to sleep, Jenna whispered, "You know, I think about that moment sometimes. The one where you called me babe by accident. It's funny how one word changed everything." Casey smiled in the dark, squeezing her hand. "Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe it was destiny trying to hurry us along. And in that moment, with laughter caught between them and peace finally settling where fear used to live, Casey realized something she would carry with her for years to come. Sometimes love doesn't arrive in grand gestures or perfect timing. It slips out by mistake, disguised as one small, unfiltered word that ends up changing everything. Forever starts in small moments. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of calm that felt rare and precious, the kind that only followed weeks of chaos, doubt, and quiet reconciliation. The air was crisp, sunlight spilling across the dorm window in long, golden streaks that danced over tangled sheets and soft laughter. Casey was the first to wake, though for a few moments she just lay there, her head resting against Jenna's shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. It was peaceful in a way that words couldn't quite describe, a peace born not from perfection, but from surviving imperfection together. She smiled faintly as she remembered how this entire story had started over something so small, so absurd, so human. A slip of the tongue, a single word that had escaped before she could stop it. Babe. One syllable that had turned her entire life inside out. And yet, here she was now, watching the morning light paint across the woman who had once made her blush with just a teasing smile. Jenna stirred slowly beside her, groaning softly before blinking her eyes open. "You're staring at me again," she murmured sleepily, her voice still rough from dreams. Casey laughed quietly. "I can't help it. You look too peaceful. It feels like I'd wake you and ruin the calm." Jenna smiled, eyes still half closed, reaching out to pull her closer. "If you're there, it's never ruined." The words landed softly, sincere and unguarded, and Casey felt something in her chest tighten in that familiar, wonderful way. It wasn't that overwhelming rush of first love anymore. It was steadier now, rooted and real. Love had changed shape between them. It wasn't all butterflies and blushing anymore. It was morning coffee shared without words. It was forgiveness after arguments. It was showing up even when it was uncomfortable. It was the quiet decision, made again and again, to stay. They spent the late morning walking through the campus gardens, hands intertwined, the wind carrying the scent of jasmine and fresh earth. Students passed by, some smiling knowingly, others oblivious, but Casey no longer cared who noticed. There was a time she would have panicked at the attention, overthinking every glance or whisper, but not anymore. She had learned that love doesn't need to hide, it just needs to be honest. When they reached a bench beneath an old oak tree, they sat down together, watching sunlight flicker through the leaves. "You know," Jenna said, brushing her fingers against Casey's, "I used to think love would be this big, dramatic thing. The kind of story people write novels about. The constant thrill, the fireworks, the chaos. But this," she smiled softly, gesturing between them, "this is better. It's real." Casey nodded, eyes glimmering with emotion. "I think real love looks like this," she said. "It's not always loud or perfect. It's small, quiet, steady. It's you bringing me coffee when I'm too anxious to leave my room. It's me showing up when you've had a bad day, even when I don't know what to say. It's knowing that even when we fight, we're still each other's safe place." Jenna leaned her head against Casey's shoulder, smiling in agreement. "You're right. It's in the small things." For a while, they simply sat there, listening to the wind and the faint hum of life around them. Later that day, they joined their friends for lunch at Emma's apartment. The moment they walked in, the teasing began. "Well, well," Emma announced dramatically. "If it isn't the world's most famous couple. Tell us, how's life after your big public love confession?" Sophie giggled. "You mean the babe saga? We still talk about it like it's a Netflix series." Jenna laughed, rolling her eyes as she took a seat beside Casey. "You two are never going to let that go, are you?" Alex, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a slice of pizza, shook her head. "Not a chance. It's the best accidental romance I've ever witnessed." Casey covered her face, groaning. "Can we please stop calling it a saga?" Emma smirked. "Nope, you started it. You said the magic word. Now we're just your loyal audience." Despite the laughter and playful mockery, there was warmth beneath it, a shared joy that came from watching something genuine grow in front of them. Everyone had seen how far Casey and Jenna had come, from shy glances and awkward teasing to the quiet confidence they now carried. And though the jokes were endless, so was the affection. As the afternoon light faded, Jenna slipped her arm around Casey's shoulders, pulling her close. "You know," she whispered softly, "for all the chaos that word caused, I wouldn't change a single thing." Casey smiled, tilting her head to rest against Jenna's. "Neither would I. It's part of our story now. The moment that started everything." As evening descended, they said goodbye to their friends and began their walk home. The campus glowed under the warm gold of the setting sun, their shadows stretching long across the path. For a moment, they walked in silence, comfortable, easy, content. Then Jenna stopped and turned to face Casey, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about us," she said softly. "About how far we've come in such a short time. I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to pretend I don't know what I want." Casey blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you want?" Jenna smiled, her eyes soft but certain. "You in every version of my future. The one where we finish school, find new cities, chase new dreams. I want you there. The words hit Casey like sunlight, gentle, but impossible to ignore. Her eyes welled, and she reached for Jenna's hands. Then you already have me. For every version of the future you want, I'll be there too. Jenna's smile grew, and she leaned in to kiss her. Slow, certain, full of the kind of love that didn't need grand gestures to prove itself. When they finally pulled apart, Casey whispered against her lips, "So, what happens next?" Jenna laughed quietly. "Whatever we make happen, babe." That night, back in the dorm, Jenna sat cross-legged on the bed while Casey rested against her shoulder, scrolling through old photos on her phone. There were so many moments, awkward selfies, blurry cafe shots, random snapshots of notes and coffee cups and laughter frozen in pixels. "Look at this one," Casey said, showing a picture from that first lunch where everything had started. Jenna laughed softly. "Oh, the famous hot sauce moment. The look on your face was priceless." "You're never going to let me live it down, are you?" Casey teased. Jenna smirked. "Never, but don't worry. I'll remind you every anniversary." They both laughed, but beneath it there was tenderness. They weren't just reliving old memories. They were rewriting them, turning embarrassment into belonging, awkwardness into affection. The word that once made Casey flinch now made her smile. Babe. It wasn't a slip of the tongue anymore. It was a language of its own. As midnight crept closer, Jenna wrapped her arms around Casey from behind, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Do you ever think about how one little mistake can change everything?" she whispered. Casey nodded. "All the time. But maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the universe giving us a push." Jenna chuckled softly, her breath warm against Casey's skin. "If that's true, then I owe the universe a thank you card." They fell asleep like that, bodies intertwined, hearts steady and full, knowing that what they had built wasn't fragile anymore. It was real, it was tested, and it was theirs. Love hadn't come to them in perfect form. It had come through embarrassment, teasing, misunderstandings, forgiveness, and endless laughter. It had come through learning how to stay, even when leaving seemed easier. And as they drifted into sleep, Jenna whispered one last word into the dark, her voice gentle and sure, sealing their story with the same magic that had started it all. "Good night, babe." The end.